As I mentioned, President Trump has blown up our presidential politics, and there's arguably no better example of the new reality we're all grappling with than my next guest. In many ways, Andrew Yang's candidacy is proof of just how vulnerable some Democrats see this president's re-election chances, but also how unpredictable our politics have become and how this contest might become unpredictable. Here we have a businessman, out of nowhere, no prior political or military experience, not only vying to defeat the president, but also getting enough voters to take him seriously that he's made the Democratic debate stage. Well, Mr. Yang joins me now. Andrew Yang, welcome to Meet the Press Daily, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chuck. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let me go with this immediate premise here. Would you be here if Donald Trump hadn't won the presidency?
Categorically not. I'm running to solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place, primarily the fact that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and Iowa. But I would not be running if Donald Trump were not our president today.
If you want something done, do it yourself. Yeah.
What is it that you think the Democratic Party misunderstood about Trump's appeal 4 years ago?
Well, if you remember, Donald Trump pointed out the devastation and suffering in many American communities.
He wasn't
the Democratic
alone, though.
message.
He wasn't alone. Many Democrats pointed this out. Bernie Sanders pointed this out. Barack Obama pointed it out 4 years earlier. I mean, that's why I only question. He wasn't the only one. He's just the most recent one.
Well, Bernie Sanders definitely pointed out the same thing. But if you remember, the prevailing response was America's already doing great. Americans heard that and did not think that the Democratic Party was truly trying to solve the problems on the ground that many Americans were experiencing. And what happened to the manufacturing workers will now happen to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, and Democrats should be laser focused on addressing that reality rather than focusing on the symptom, which is President Trump.
In some way, though, your signature proposal doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It feels like a Band-Aid. And I say this, your signature proposal, this universal income, and I say a Band-Aid because you're basically trying to fill the gap as we figure out what the jobs of the 21st century look like. Am I being too cynical about it?
Well, if you think what would happen to communities around the country if every American adult got $1,000 a month, it would create more than 2 million new jobs right there in our communities. It would help recognize the kind of work that my wife does every day at home with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. So it's not a Band-Aid. It actually supercharges our economy and helps create opportunities in the direction that we need to go, which includes the caring economy, arts, entrepreneurship, creativity, as well as Main Street jobs because of an increase in consumer buying power.
Positive aspects about your plan is that if somebody wanted to pursue an art and really couldn't afford to make a living doing it, you're giving them an opportunity to do it. I get that, but how does that grow our economy?
Well, our economy right now is up to a record $20 trillion, up $5 trillion in the last 12 years alone. The problem is that we have these winner-take-all dynamics, that the gains are concentrated just in a handful of industries and companies and individuals. And so if you spread that bounty more broadly throughout the American economy, it does create opportunities, including in the arts, but also in entrepreneurship. And as you know, I'm a serial entrepreneur. We need to have more Americans being put in position to do the kind of work that they actually want to do.
Let's talk about the border. There is a lot of angst and anxiety over the border. The president believes the issue is our asylum laws. Democrats believe that some of this has to do with you can't pull money away from Central America. We've got to have a different sort of tolerance policy here. We have an increase in migration over the border. What would you be doing about it?
Well, the first thing we have to do is put adequate resources to work at the border. We have a shortage of not just asylum judges and facilities, but even Border Patrol personnel. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of unfilled positions because these positions don't pay as competitively as other roles in our government. And also, these are not appealing places to live. So we have to do the work that we know needs to be done in order to have our policies actually be effective on the ground. It serves nobody if there's a multi-month or even year-long waiting process to have an asylum hearing.
Zap your dumb ass. Bow down to a true pimp, bitch.
It hurt it, mother.
I don't give a damn.
I want to go back to your universal income proposal because our debt is already up to $20 trillion. And I know in some ways, if you already get some government assistance, you wouldn't get this money. But how does this not, even in the short term, inflate our debt and put us in a budgetary crisis going forward?
Well, if you look up, Chuck, who are the big winners in this economy? It's Amazon and other trillion-dollar tech companies. And in Amazon's case, they're literally paying zero in federal taxes. So you're 100% right that if you have that situation, it's going to be very difficult.
So are you changing
to
the tax
deficit.
structure? You're going to change the tax structure first before you hand out these checks?
Oh, we do it simultaneously. And the great thing is we'd be taking money from the Amazons of the world, put it directly into the hands of American families and consumers.
Explain how that works. Yeah, I mean, Jeff Bezos is going to write you a check?
Oh, you know, we're going to do better than that. We're going to get a toll with every Amazon transaction. We're going to join every other advanced economy in the world and have a value-added tax, which would give the American public a tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile. That's how we prosper in the 21st century.
And if you're the nominee, I've seen people push either a fair tax or a VAT tax or a national sales tax. And every candidate that has tried to put it out there, if they win a nomination, they get eviscerated because somebody basically shows, hey, look at how much it's going to cost to take your kids back to school now. Look at how much it's going to cost to buy everyday products. How do you beat back, which has been a tried and true method politically, to defeat national sales taxes, to defeat the VAT, things like this, where people see the initial bill, and I don't care what kind of refund situation you put in there, that does scare people.
Well, it's more than a refund, Chuck. It's actually a dividend. And for every dollar from the VAT, American consumers would be receiving $3. It would increase the buying power of approximately the bottom 92% of Americans. And Americans understand what $12,000 a year would mean for them and their families. Very, very few Americans consume enough for a mild VAT to come anywhere near counterbalancing a $1,000 dividend a month.
All right, let me go back to a few other issues that you're not as focused, or certainly that we haven't been as focused on. The situation in Iran. How would you try to deal with Iran's belligerent nature in the Middle East? The biggest criticism of President Obama and the Iran nuclear deal was, okay, the good news is you got them to agree on some limits when it comes to the nuclear issue, but it did nothing when it came to them funding terrorist organizations and things like that. What would your administration do to curtail some of that bad behavior by Iran?
Well, I would look to re-enter the nuclear deal. And if you look at it, even after the U.S. pulled out under the Trump administration, there are other countries that signed on that are still there. So we need to de-escalate tensions in the Iran region and make it so that the Iran government's incentives are actually aligned with ours in terms of both de-escalating the nuclear development and hopefully getting them to reduce their funding of terrorist organizations in other parts of the region.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000! What, 9,000?
You have a theory of the case on how to deal with the Trump meat grinder? You know, he has a different way of talking to the public, of talking to candidates. Why will you be different at handling the Trump style of political campaign differently than others have tried and failed at?
Well, they say, Chuck, that the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. And I'm already peeling off thousands of Trump supporters, independents, libertarians, conservatives, as well as obviously Democrats and progressives. But I agree with many of your colleagues that we need to be focused on beating Donald Trump, and I'm the ideal candidate for that because I'm focused on solving the problems that got him into office in the first place.
But does that mean taking him on directly, leaving these things, not letting stuff go in unanswered, or is it ignoring some of the antics?
Well, it's about cutting to the heart of the matter and the truth. You know, and I've talked to many people who voted for Donald Trump who recognize that his bluster is not serving them well. It's one reason why many Americans who voted for Donald Trump are looking for a different solution. And I'm happy to say that my campaign is drawing many of those voters over to our side of the aisle.
Why aren't you running for a lower office first and maybe see if you can win and get more people to mainstream your proposals? I just say that, shooting for the presidency, I get it. It is one way, and you're certainly getting more attention than you would if you were running for the U.S. Senate somewhere. But isn't it more practical to try to build this ground up?
Well, Chuck, I dearly wish that I felt like we had the time, but the reality is that robot trucks are 5 to 10 years away from hitting our highways, and driving a truck is the most common job in 29 states around the country. 30% of our malls are closing in the next 4 years because Amazon's sucking up $20 billion in business. So if I took decades to try and climb the political ladder, unfortunately, our economy would be transforming underneath our feet. We just don't have the time for someone to play political gamesmanship.
All right. Andrew Yang, as I said, one of the more unusual candidates that in some ways the Donald Trump era has inspired. We will see you in Miami, sir. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views.
I'll see you in Miami, Chuck. Looking forward to it.
You got it.